All right, very good. Welcome, everyone. We will have two different sessions on this introduction to V9R4. I do want to mention up front that we will provide a link to those who are attending the webinar today and tomorrow. We'll provide you with a link to download this version within 24 hours of the second session. All right, so with that, let me get started. So this is RecurDyn V9R4 introduction. We will cover a variety of areas. So in the first session, we're going to cover the graphical user interface. We will also cover enhancements to the solver. And then in the second session, we'll cover MFBD, which is the multi-flexible body dynamics. This is our term related to the full flex module, which is the non-linear flexible body. So we'll cover all those enhancements in session 2, and then also enhancements to all the different RecurDyn toolkits. So we're going to start here with the GUI. And first of all, just a brief introduction. There is a new plotting program that's provided with RecurDyn. It's called RecurDyn Post. And the purpose of RecurDyn Post is to provide plotting capability when you have many plot points. So we do encourage all of you with your RecurDyn models to use the plot multiplier factor and to generate lots of plot points, because when you have abrupt dynamic events, then to have an abundance of plot points makes it better for you to understand that dynamic event. The other thing about having many plot points is that in case you're worried about studying the vibrational aspects of your model and you want to do an FFT, then if you have lots of plot points, then you're able to see more information on the higher frequencies. So for that reason, or those two reasons, it's a good thing to have many plot points, but at the same time, to read them into RecurDyn, it becomes maybe a slow task. So to address that, we have the RecurDyn Post module, and you can see the basic layout here. Nelson Wu is going to give a presentation about this after my presentation, but just by way of introduction, to just say, yeah, this is part of the release of V9R4, is to introduce this product, and he'll review all the aspects of how the screen is subdivided and so forth. And the plot package is fast because it's designed to be that way, but also there's an option to convert data. So Nelson will talk about that in some detail, and there's various scripting capabilities, and all this Nelson will cover. The user interface is a bit different than the RecurDyn post-processing, so Nelson will help us understand kind of the connection between what RecurDyn is doing as far as plotting and how the post package is handling that. So moving on to other GUI enhancements. First of all, related to the solid modeling aspect of RecurDyn, we have these CAD modifications. One of them is this new command we can see here, the fill hole command. So that's really a command that's used to stitch across an open surface, and so basically it will look at all the free edges, it will fill in a surface. As you can see in the dialog box, you can choose between a smooth surface or non-smooth surface. And so in this case of this empty box, in other words, a box with an open top, as we do a smooth option, then it's going to try to match the contour of the surfaces associated with the free edges. So that's why it comes up the way it does. And, it comes up with a pretty interesting shape here, but what it's doing is just trying to make the tangency match here of the new surface to the original surfaces. When you pick the non-smooth option, it doesn't try to match, the tangent condition there. So it's free to make an abrupt turn and, have an angle. And so in that case, then it's just fitting a flat surface over the top. Okay. Why is it important to be able to fill in these surface holes? One important application is when you have geometry that you want to mesh and use with full flex, then you may want to defeature it. So this filling in of the holes is a one technique of defeaturing. So the second example here is we have a wheel with some slots cut out, and so we can then see what happens when we give this command. Then those slots are all filled in, and then meshing should be able to occur across those boundaries. The second command is we have this new scale command. So you can pick some RecurDyn geometry. You can see here in the dialog box, you can pick this entity button and then pick whatever graphical entity. And then you can actually scale it independently in X, Y, and Z. Although most of the time these are probably going to be the same values, but you do have the option to change them. And then it will scale up the geometry. And then with that scale geometry, then you're able to work with it however you would like. So I think the scaling can really allow for some interesting parametric changes and so forth, and I think can be quite useful. Okay, next geometry related enhancement is to be able to do pattern of geometries or a pattern of solids. So you can see here we have a solid that's this collection of tubes hooked together, so it's just a box with kind of just the edges. And then by using the pattern command, we were able to come up with the complex geometry shown on the right. When you do this patterning, you can do it with translations or rotations. And so if you look at this geometry that was created, here on the right, basically this is, several steps, and you can see, in each direction, there's patterning, in the depth, the width, the height, and so then those can be 3 different operations. Then rotational patterning, then you can basically pattern the geometry, around an arc, and so depending on models that you may be building up, this might be quite efficient to be able to quickly create a set of entities that follow, some kind of rotational or translational pattern. And then, this pattern geometry, each one is an independent solid, so then they can be edited separately later on, if you like. Next one is modification of local geometry. Basically, we have had all these different commands, and the scale is a new one. But what this enhancement here is that, as you can see in the dialog box, you can pick a solid, you can look at the different operations, and including the new scale command, and then you can go back and modify things. So that's really helpful, because in the past, you would basically have to kind of restart from scratch if you wanted to make a change. I mean, you could basically delete some of these operations depending on how you did them. So you wouldn't have to delete the geometry, but you had to delete the operations. And now you can actually edit these different local operations. So we have some new enhancements with regards to importing geometry. So in the case of CATIA point data, you have the option to convert these points into a marker. Each point can become a marker. And in the the import options, that you've had access, as it shows here on the bottom left, to work with the assembly hierarchy from the CAD system in order to combine solids into logical bodies. There's now a new command where you can actually create a translator log file. I mean, that's been on by default. So this new option is that if you don't want to see those translator files, you can turn off that option. So that's the import enhancement. And then in the user interface in general with V9R4, we've done a little bit of this in the past, but in this version, basically all the dialog boxes are now resizable. And so that gives you a lot of flexibility. And for those of you who are working with like multiple screens, this ability to resize and have things out there and convenient, can be really helpful. So so feel free to just check that out, and you'll see that the resizing is available for all the dialog boxes. And then when you do the resizing, also things have been carefully set up so that Recurtyn will remember what you've customized. And as you know, that's not been true in the past. Things would reset, but now this custom dialog box size is now retained, so that when you reopen it, it should be the way you had it. So that should help a lot. So there's been a lot of enhancements to the database window. And first one is you actually now have a search capability. So as you can see in the upper right corner of the database window, there's now a little search icon. And then you can type in the name of the entity that you're looking for. The second thing is that you've been able to see the different parametric points and parametric values in the database window in their own little group, as we can see here in the lower left. But now with V9R4, this is like a really smart enhancement. We're actually showing the values right in the database window, so you don't have to necessarily go into a separate dialog box to see what the values are. So in the case of these parametric points, as you see on the upper right, those are X, Y, and Z coordinates. So all those are shown. And then in the case of parametric values, it will, simply show the one value. The next enhancement is you can go directly to the motion dialog box by, you can now select properties, from, the motion entity. So if you can look to where I'm pointing, kind of in the center of all these dialog boxes, for a given joint, in this case, Revolute joint, if you expand out that entity, it will show you the base marker, the action marker, and then if there is a motion defined, it would show you this motion entity. So what's new is that you can now use this properties, you can click the right mouse button, properties will pop up, you can select that and go directly into the motion dialog box. So I think that can save a lot of time. Likewise, you can open the expression edit dialog box with the edit command with any of the entities that are listed under expressions, and it'll just take you directly to that dialog box. And also, there's now a new category for design variables. That used to be kind of mixed in with parametric values, but now it's its own category. So that's, I think, more clear. Zoom factor, you can adjust how aggressive zooming occurs as you operate your mouse or whatever your device is. And that's in the general settings for the display settings. And so then, you know, there's the default value is 1, but you can make it some other value. So to, you know, however aggressive you would like it to be, it'll follow along. So some of these devices have ways in their drivers to, you know, also control this, but this way you can just do it directly inside of RecurDyn, because maybe the zooming is comfortable with other software you're using, but you want to adjust it in RecurDyn, so you can do that separately. Okay, next enhancement is highlight line width option. So as you know, when you highlight something, then it will, you know, highlight it with a certain line. And it tended to be like a double width line. And if you would like it to be, you know, wider or narrower or whatever, then you can use this pull down menu to adjust the width how you would like it. This next one I think is really important and helpful, which is now you can display the magnitude of a force. I mean, you know, you've been able to define, you know, these force vectors and then the arcs to represent the torques. But now you can actually display the numbers, you know, go along with that. And so that, you know, just communicates more detailed information, you know, immediately with the animation. So I think that's really helpful enhancement. For a few releases, we've had these tags, name tags that you could turn on for the different bodies and different entities, you know, in a way to control what's being displayed. So the enhancement with V9R4 is that those tags weren't responding exactly properly when you were doing a cutting plane and basically hiding a portion of the model. So, you know, basically that's been corrected. So with the cutting plane, it will only show the labels that belong to the geometry that's being shown. And then the second thing is that there's been some improvements just on the readability of that name flag that shows up. I mean, when the body is being selected, sometimes the name tag was, you know, couldn't be read very well. So that's been fixed so that it remains clear whether or not the body is selected or not. The select list, select box, you know, those are very useful things. But what's been enhanced here, just to make the usability better, is that when you're in the middle of defining something and you need to select basically a numeric value, then it will make the select box select list inactive because it doesn't apply. So that just, you know, gives you that feedback that gee, at this point you don't want to be using the select box or select list because you want to put in some kind of value. So I think that's more clear. Okay, so on the ribbon, the main ribbon in RecurDyn, it's been in the display or in the settings area, that's been enhanced really to add one more dialog box and in doing so make things, I think, more clear. So basically what's new is that there's a new general dialog box that's separated from, you know, everything used to be in this display dialog box. And actually, I think this is a bit historical because originally there was just one settings menu and it had display stuff and general stuff. And then later on, we started adding these other settings, dialog boxes, and then, but the display one then just took on this, you know, display, but it had the general stuff in it too. So, you know, now more appropriately, we have a separate general dialog box for the general settings. And so you can see now the different dialog boxes for general and display. You can see the different panels with the different tabs. So everything here should look pretty familiar because it was there before, but it's just regrouped to be more intuitive. So here's your general settings, model name, comments about the model. And then all these other options, you know, are things that you've seen before in this display option. And then under display, the tabs are basically, you know, view, geometry, and advanced. And so you can see how things are laid out, I think, in a pretty straightforward way. So I think it'll just be easier to find the option you want with this new layout. So I think it's a real improvement. When you're you know, running a simulation, sometimes you want to pause. So there's this new option that you can actually save the RAD file when you pause. As you know, when you pause and then you want to, you know, do an animation or do some plotting, you know, especially if you have flex bodies, you know, it will go through an operation, you know, to, you know, look through all the data and so forth. So that all this data is made available, and, you know, the RAD file is, you know, has the animation data. And so you can see all those animation, all that animation information, but it wasn't, Recurtyn wasn't saving the RAD file at that point. But now you have an option to do that. So that way, you know, no matter what happens later on, you know, if somebody pulls the plug on your computer or something like that, then you know the RAD file is saved, you know, up through the point where you've reviewed it. So that's just a new option. And next one is, you know, Recurtyn can import CSV files, you know, for defining things like splines. And in some of the toolkits, there are certain inputs that can be done. So what's new is that the routine that's inputting the file now supports a comment character. So you can put in your own comments in the file, and that file can be read in without a problem. So you know, I think it's a good idea to, you know, put in comments because you know, you may want to archive some of this stuff, and then it's nice to have descriptions of what's going on embedded right inside the file. So now with this comment character, you can freely put in as many comments as you would like. You may have noticed that when you're highlighting certain things in the database window, you know, when you select them, some things are highlighted, some things not so much, and especially with markers. So there's now an option to show, excuse me, show the center of mass marker when the body is highlighted. And specifically the center of mass marker in the body. So, you know, in the past, you would highlight or you would select this CM in the database window. It would not highlight, but anyway, you can now turn on this option to show it. And if you don't want to show it, then that's okay too. You just leave that or make that unchecked. There's a new close all command. So you can close all the different windows you have open in Recurtyn. So that's a convenience if you're ready to just shut everything down. So, you know, this it shows here all the different options for close. So close all models, close all plots. So you can delete unused subentities. So, you know, we started in Recurtyn being able to delete unused markers. And now they've added this capability to delete unused sub-entities. Sub-entities are all the things that are like non-graphical. So like parametric values, parametric points, things like splines. Anyway, you know, there you can see it in the main Recurtyn ribbon under the sub-entity tab. That you know, you can see what all these sub-entities are. But anyway, you know, in the database, it can be figured out which things are referenced and which things are not. So then you can delete what's not referenced. When you're in the spline, dialog box with the right mouse click. There's now a new capability to copy and paste, the actual splines. So that can be very useful as you're creating things. If you want to create a variation inside of RecurDyn, so you can leave the old spline, make a copy, modify the copy, and then you could switch between the original and the modified copy freely and stuff like that. That's what that's for. There's a new filter function, and basically, it's for the relation map that can be brought up. And so sometimes in the database window, you may make certain entities inactive. And so this option here allows you to select whether or not you want to show those inactive items in the relation map. And that makes a lot of sense, because I can think of cases where I would want to show that stuff and other cases where I would definitely not want to see that stuff. And so now you can go ahead and just toggle that. So that's very convenient. Subsystem now has ability to be in a layer. And so as you know, bodies and different things can be in different layers. So now subsystems as a whole can be in different layers, so that can make it very convenient to turn on and off display of a subsystem and things like that. There's been enhancement here in the tracing data when you're plotting. So you can see in the left, we have the dialog box for V9R3. So there's certain information being shown, and as you remember, when you trace along with the cursor along the curve, it will update X value, Y value of the nearest point, tell you what point that is, and give you min and max information on the curve and so forth. So now it's been enhanced so that now all these data entities are now in their own fields, and also it's added some information about the which point the min and max, where the min and max is occurring in the plot. So that can be really helpful, because you can export all the point data to Excel, or you might want to look at it in a tabular way and then pick out which point was the min and max and so forth for a given function. So that information is provided. This last one on this page, with Windows 10, there's this idea of Action Center notification. So, the Action Center will receive an entry, and it will say, oh, your simulation is finished successfully, meaning the RecurDyn simulation, and it will give some report on the runtime and so forth. But anyway, that will pop up. So, when things are running and you're working on something else, it's kind of nice to have that notification pop up, and it's using the native Windows 10 capability to do that. There's been a fair amount of work related to working with post-processing files. So there's a new capability here to regenerate the result file. And basically, the kind of thing you're going to do, one option is to merge files. Another one would be to extract files that are done, with a separate solver run of RecurDyn, in other words. So, for those who have been running the standalone solver, you may have noticed that the output files are organized a little bit differently than they are when you're just running inside the GUI in Windows. And the reason for that is that some of the post-processing is done inside the RecurDyn user interface. So there's not a RAD file when you're doing the standalone solver. It's a RAN file. The RPLT file is the same. But there's different files, and with the toolkits and so forth, there's some different things, flex bodies and so forth. So if you want to extract the result files from these other file types, you can do that, and that's basically replicating what would happen inside the Recurtyn user interface. You can also merge results files, several of them together. And so where, you want to do a simulation and logical pieces, maybe there's a series of assembly steps or a series of operational steps that you want to run separately. And then when you're all done, you can merge, everything all together however you would like to. So that's what this regenerate results files dialog box is all about, is performing all those functions. And you can see all the different options, picking min max times and so forth. Anyway, so it's it allows you to put things together, and then that way you can produce a long animation if you need to for a presentation, or you can have a plot that includes these multiple steps and so forth, but it's, you work with it as one set of outputs. We have some additional support on the Linux side, which is now with Linux, it supports network installation. So in situations where you may want to do a lot of client installs, you can do this, configure up this Linux network, and anyway, it supports this Samba server, and that can make things more convenient for your IT folks. Recurtyn now supports Visual Studio 2019 for user subroutines. So I have not tried this one yet, but the concept is that you don't need to have your own compiler, but you can actually use, I mean, you don't have to get like a separate compiler, but you can use Visual Studio 2019 and create user subroutines. And then third-party enhancements. So, we do these things from time to time according to enhancements that the third-party packages make. But also sometimes we don't change certain libraries, unless it's a major release, just to make sure things are very consistent from release to release. So in this case, we have this interop 2020 upgraded. And then the second one is the security, licensing is FlexNet. So basically saying that this version 11.14 is still maintained, but you have the choice. You can actually pick it when you're doing the install of the license server. You pick which FlexNet version you want to work with. So you can use the later 11.16.5.1. So you can choose which version of FlexNet you would like to use. And maybe your IT people have certain preferences. Okay, that's the GUI things. Of course, some of the GUI enhancements, influence the solver and so forth. But at any rate, now we will talk about the solver enhancements. This one, modifications are made in the solver, and then we get to see it in the user interface. But basically with some of the contacts, with the geo contacts, you have the ability to define multiple contact points, and then we can look at force vectors. So originally we would just see the force magnitude in the vectors, of all the translational forces, and then maybe all the rotational forces would be with the arc, many arcs. So, but now you can show the different components. So the magnitude is the force vector option here. So that's still, an option. But then you can separately say, oh, just show me the forces in the x direction, y direction, z direction, normal force, or the friction force. And so that can be really helpful, because especially to separate out the friction force. So example of that is shown here in the right, in the middle. Sometimes to understand what's happening with regards to friction, it's really helpful to separate it out. You can look at the force vector and sometimes get a feel for what portion of it is friction, but once you get more than a few force vectors, it gets to be really tough. So now you can separate it out, display it separately, and really gain some intuition of what's happening in the system. There's a new constraint. It's a point to surface constraint. And if you look at the graphic here, we're kind of tracing a path on the surface, and it's like, oh, that kind of looks like a contact. So the idea here is that we want this to be a constraint that can replace a contact in certain situations. And the motivation for replacing the contact is that if you have situations where there's a contact going on, there's not liftoff, and you want to just have as fast of a simulation as possible, then to do it with a constraint versus a contact is a very appropriate thing to do. So it being a constraint, the idea is that, in this case, we have some bodies. It's a spring-loaded body residing on this orange shaft here. And as you move the body with the surface, back and forth, then the tip here with this green-gray body is free to move up and down, with regards to the orange shaft. So that's, kind of 1 degree of freedom. And then as you move the surface around, it will trace a path, and that tip will always be following exactly on the surface. So this is very fast, it's very smooth, and so it's highly recommended to do this when you have these kind of situations of just wanting to follow an arbitrary surface, and it needs to be one of these UV surfaces, which are, a mapped surface, with segments, in a U and V direction. We have segments in each direction. So with that type of surface, this can be very efficient, speed things up, and also just provide very smooth behavior. There's a new function expression. So increment of the angle, or incremental angle, it's calculating the angle between markers. So if we look down here in the lower left and look at these vectors, so we have an angle between, the two different directions. One's marker 2 to marker 1, the other marker 2 to marker 3. So if we look at what is the interior angle in 3 dimensions, that's this incremental angle, theta. So, excuse me, if you don't have a, we have an option here to, in the expression, to name action marker, base marker, and then a reference marker. So if you don't have the reference marker, then it's going to just look at this overall angle. And as you see here, it's going to be a single value is shown in the scope. So this can be very useful, to just, track an angle, and just be able to define it very efficiently. This one is a really nice enhancement, and we've had this output request for a long time. Always we've had it, I think. And one of the options was an expression. You can define an expression output request. And then you would pick out expressions, basically, I think 6 at a time. And then they would be provided, as outputs to plot. But to define the output request, it really took, quite a few manual operations. So what's been done now is that in the expression list dialog box, there's a new column on the right called output, and all you have to do is check the box, and then that expression will be included in the plot data. So this is showing the plot database window here on the upper right, and you can see there's this new expression group. And then, very straightforward because the names are exactly matching the names that are in the expression list. So you know what everything is, and then you can just click each one to plot it. So that should save a lot of time to set up those expression outputs. And, actually sometimes when I'm trying to understand some aspect of the model, I may have like a very complex expression and it's not working properly. So one of the things I do sometimes is, you know, I sit there, I mean, I try to visually debug it and often that doesn't work. And I don't know, you know, there's something, you know, some values going on that are just not what I'm expecting, but I don't know where the problem is. So I'll split the expression into, you know, I'll just make a sort of a copy of it and then take that copy and subdivide it into a bunch of independent expressions. And then I, you know, want to look at the plot data for all of them so I can get a feel for, you know, which piece of it has the unexpected values. Anyway, so with that approach and then being able to use this output option, then very quick to get all the feedback information you need. The solver has this new option that is going to be very useful for some situations where you're having problems with the model. And I think we all have run into the getting the message of Recurtyn stopping because the current step size is too small. And so what's happened, you know, historically, when the step size gets too small is the you know, the last data that's recorded is the last, you know, standard report time. So as you run a simulation for a certain amount of time, you name, you know, how many steps you want in the simulation, which will then correspond with animation frames. You can put in a plot multiplier factor, which will tell you plot points, and then the reporting time will then reverts to being the, you know, interval for the plot points. So what may happen is you have a reporting time and then you know, it starts going through some more steps. And actually, you know, between one report time and the next report time, you could actually have successful steps of the integrator, but it's, you know, we're just not recording everything, you know, in general, because it would just be too much data. So it's like we have the reporting time, and then we go through and the integrator takes some steps, and then maybe it takes, you know, the next step it takes, it hits a problem. So what happens is that if it hits a problem on the first try, so that's what this number one's all about, you know, this is corresponding to this red thing of it, you know, it takes the big step, and then it tries to converge, it cannot. So then what Recurtyn does is that if it can't converge, you know, within a few iterations, you know, it's specified number of iterations. If it doesn't converge, then it will cut the step size in half. And then it will try to converge again. And so in this case, it cut the step size in half and it's like, oh, it converged just fine. So then it's like, okay, I took this size of step, it converged, I'll take another step of that same size. And this is, you know, try number 3. And once again, we're over here and there's something about, you know, maybe this point in time where something is amiss. Anyway, so, you know, the sub step 3 also fails. So then it cuts the step size in half. So now we get to position 4, tries again, and it's able to converge. And so then it's like, okay, let's take another little step. And, you know, same as, you know, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, these are all same step sizes. So 4 to 5, same step size. We're back to the same point. Once again, it doesn't converge. Anyway, bottom line is that in the past, all you had was the information way back here from this report time. But now when this error occurs, the current step size being too small, it will provide results from try or from substep number 2 and substep number 4. All the successful iterations will be shown. And then when whether you plot data or animate with time, you will see these last 2 steps, and that may provide some insight as to why things don't want to converge further along in time. So that's, you know, that's going to be really helpful for debugging. You know, I've used other software, and some of these packages, although well-known packages, you know, actually would fail, and there would never be any indication what was going on. And then I started using Recurtyn, and it's like, oh, that Recurtyn solver would just keep going even when I had misdefined various things, and I've had all the toolkits, you know, exploding, chains exploding, belts exploding, tracks exploding, you know, because I had misdefined something, and you know, Recurtyn kept going, so I had that feedback. So that was great. And so what this enhancement does is kind of continue that trend of trying to show as much data as possible, because there are some situations where the Recurtyn solver is going to stop, and this way we get as much information as possible. Okay, geosphere contact, we have a new options here for being able to create it, and you don't even need spheres anymore. So, you know, you can just go ahead and pick the surface of interest, and then whether, you know, you can do some kind of multi-sphere thing, but it's really multi-points, and then Recurtyn will create the spheres for you and set up all the different contacts for you. So that can be a big time saver. This is kind of a detail thing, but when you have you know, the geo contacts with many contact points, all that information is placed into the .con file. And what has been the case is when there was no contact happening at all, it was just left to be blank. But in some cases, if you want to do some processing on the file, it's better to have 0 values than no values. So there's an option where you can just turn that on. And there's also a new option for the geocontact results to be reported in the rplot file with respect, let's see, to the ground inertia marker. So you have some choices there of what the reference is with regards to the contact reporting. So otherwise, it's, you know, going to use the reference frame for the contact itself. So you have an option then of global or local type of referencing there. So that is what I have for today's session. We will have a second session and deal with those other topics. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Nelson for the presentation on the RecurDyn Post.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Thanks, Brant. I'm going to discuss RecurDyn Post today, and let me just go ahead and start this presentation. Yes, so what is RecurDyn Post? So this is what we're going to be going over today. That's the first thing we'll be answering, and then we're going to talk about the advantages of RecurDyn Post. And the next thing is how RecurDyn Post handles large RPLT files, which are the RecurDyn plot data files. That's all the simulation plot data is stored in after running a simulation. We're going to go through some basic functions, and then some other useful functions, and then just wrap it up with a summary after that. So what is RecurDyn Post? RecurDyn Post is a standalone post processor of Recurtyn, and it's now supported from with this latest version of RecurDyn V9R4. And it can be executed without Recurtyn. And so basically, as far as licensing is concerned, one post license comes with each license of RecurDyn Professional. RecurDyn and RecurDyn Post can be executed at the same time, so you can view the screens simultaneously if you have multiple monitors. and various features for plotting are supported. So the advantages of RecurDyn Post. The main advantage is that it allows you to efficiently handle large RecurDyn plot data files. So it has efficient algorithms to handle RPLT files larger than tens of gigabytes. And the file handling is done using a chunk method, which we'll cover shortly. And so the response is fast with the basic operations such as drawing the curves or zooming or fitting the screen. And there are a couple new features for data analysis, such as compare data, change data, and preview mode. All right, so as far as handling large RPLT files, well, I guess the question can be asked, when would you have large RPLT files? And that occurs when you have very large models with many bodies, joints, or contacts. For example, greater than 100 of any of those entities. It can also occur if you have a contact where you've specified many contact points to be reported, and so that would be controlled here in this dialog when you're bringing up the properties dialog of your contact, and here's where you would define, for example, if the default I believe is 10, but sometimes you can increase the number to really clearly capture what's going on with your contact, and just to understand the behavior of the model better. The large RPLT files can also occur if you have a lot of steps or plot points, and so that occurs when these parameters here are set to high values. For example, if you have a lot of steps defined, or if you have a large plot multiplier step factor. And the situations where you would set these parameters to higher values is if you have some type of abrupt dynamic event and you want to capture that event with high resolution, or if you're running like a FFT analysis on high frequency events. And so in that situation, you want to be able to you want to make sure that you're sampling your events with enough points to capture the frequencies accurately. Okay, so starting RecurDyn Post is pretty easy. There's basically a Post button in the main ribbon menu under the Analysis tab. And so if you have a model open that has results loaded, when you click on that tool, it's just going to open up the Post application with the results already loaded in. And there's also, okay, so as far as handling large RPLT files, the way to handle those in Post is that, okay, so let me just go over a little bit of information here. If the file size is large, drawing a new curve can take a long time. For example, if the RPLT file is larger than 10 gigabytes, then it could, just to draw a curve, it could take from several tens of seconds to several minutes. If this is the case, then what you would do is to convert the RPLT file to what's called a chunk file, and then using these chunk files improves the performance. And there's a conversion process that is easy to do. Basically, you just click on this convert to chunk file, and it brings up a dialog box where you just select the RPLT file. The chunk file is then created, and then you go to click on the import button and just import the chunk file. So we're just going to go through a little bit of a demonstration of that. So here I have a model of an engine, and if we play the results, we can see that we have results loaded into the model. And so now if we want to open the Post application, under the Analysis tab, we would just click on this Post button. And so now Post has opened, and we can also see that the results from the model from the simulation have been loaded. And we can do just some of the basic functions. Oh, I guess I should probably go over, let me just go over the chunking process first. So if this does happen to be a large, you know, a large RPLT file, the procedure to convert that would be to go up here and click on this button, convert to chunk, and then here you would just select whatever RPLT file you want to convert, and then just click on the open button. And in this case, I think I had already written out that file just to test things out, so I got that little informational message. And now, so we're just going to maybe delete this for now, and we can see that if I click on the import button, then this chunk file is now available. So I can go ahead and click on that, and it's loaded up the results. And now, just as far as some basic functions, just to draw some of these curves, this is similar to the regular plotting environment in Recurtyn, in that you can just double click on any of these items here, and it will go ahead and draw the curve. Now to delete these entities, you can basically just select the curve, clicking on it in the plotting window there, and then you just click the delete key. And to zoom, right now I'm just using the mouse scroll wheel, and you can see that that's a pretty easy operation. And if you've worked with the normal plotting environment in Recurtyn, you'll know that this is a lot nicer than that, because in the regular plotting environment, you can sort of do a select zoom, but then once you select zoom, then there's these scroll bars on the side that you have to use to sort of move the screen around. But here it's quite easy. Basically, it's also the zooming function is you know, taking into account where the mouse pointer is, so I can zoom out here, then move my mouse pointer to a different section of the curve and zoom in there. So this is actually pretty nice if you're really trying to examine a particular portion of your curve. Let's see. So, and now if you also want to reset the scaling, you would just double click on the background of the plot, and it would just reset the zoom factor to fit the curve. And there's also some copying functions, which are pretty convenient now. Again, you just select the curve that you would want to copy. But actually, you can even do this with multiple curves. So here, I'm just using the Control key to select multiple curves from the plot. And then if I just press Control C, just the standard shortcut key for copying, then I can come into like any type of a spreadsheet program like Excel, and you can press Control V, and you'll see that it's copied out. It's pasted it in CSV format. So you can paste it to a spreadsheet or to a text file. There's also, if you click in the background of the plot and type Control C, then if I now press Control V to paste, you can see it pastes the image of the plot window. All right, so moving on to some of the next. Okay, so some of the other functions here is that, just now I was using the mouse key to select multiple curves. You can also use this drag and drop feature select box to multiple select curves. But you can also change the functionality of the select box so that it instead defines a portion of the plot that you want to zoom into. So that functionality is up here, and you can basically just switch back and forth between those two. I'm just going to reset this curve, but there's also a pan feature. So what I'm doing here is I'm clicking the middle mouse button, or in my case, the scroll wheel. So in addition to zooming with the scroll wheel, if I operate it as the wheel, I can just press down on it, and that allows me to easily pan, and then I can zoom into certain portions. And then there's also the ability to adjust the scale. So if I just reset this again, I can click on these axes here, and this will sort of adjust the scale of that particular axis. If I click, on the lower portion of the axis, then it's sort of adjusting the space on the lower half of that axis. And then if I just double click on that axis, it just resets it to the original setting. All right, let me move on to the next feature here. Okay, so now if I were to simulate another model, and then if I want to import those results as well. So in this case, I just increased the mass of the pistons in that engine model. And so now I have two sets of results. And so just to make things a little clearer here, I'm just going to right click on the background here and click on Clear All. And that's just going to clear the display. And so now what I can do is, I have two result sets loaded into the database window here. And if I want to compare results between the two models, what I can do is click on one of the entities and then right click and say multi-draw series. And so that's pretty similar to how the old standard plotting environment works. There's also a notion of and the ability to select different curves, and this is brought up with this show checkbox button here. And then once you've clicked on that, you can select, different entities, and maybe we'll just do this here, and then that can be used for then it'll draw multiple series based on what you've selected using those checkboxes. As far as if I wanted to control the appearance of the curve, that would be, I would first select one of the curves. And then there's a properties window here on the right that is displayed, and it has all these properties of whatever I've selected. And since I've selected this curve, then here are the controls to select the color or the thickness. So it should be thinner, or I can increase the thickness. So here you can see that it's increased the thickness of that curve. If you're interested in changing the marker on that curve, then here it will change that for you. And just going to move on to the next thing here. So I was changing the properties of that curve, and now if I want to change, if I click on the axis, this y-axis here, then I'm able to change the name here, or the, well, actually here's where I could change the name as it's displayed here. So if I just make a change, hit return, then you can see the change has been made. You can change the units, different alignment options, and here's where you would display, you can display bands. Let's see, I want to, okay, so here's also where you can display the grid lines as well. And okay, so now we can talk about how to export curve data. And the way you would do that is you would select a curve, and there's an export curve button up here. And then that you would just save that to some CSV file, and that's how that's done. You can also select multiple curves. So if I use my mouse to select all these curves, hang on. Okay, so for some reason that's, I'm just going to use the control key to select multiple curves. So I've selected 3 at this point. And then if I select again, and so let's see if I open up that, you can, if I open up the file that I just exported, you can see that it has exported the data for 3 curves, all 3 curves that I selected. Now, in the old, in the existing plotting environment for Recurtyn, there was the way to define how many windows you have open. That's in Recurtyn Post. There's something similar, except it's a little bit more flexible, actually. And it's called add side. So you can add a window to different sides of the existing window. So here I'll add one to the right side. And then if I select the window that I just brought up, then if I wanted to add one to the bottom, I could do that. So now I have three, and I could go back to my original window and add one there. So it's a little bit more flexible as far as what you're displaying on the screen at one time. And then once you have these multiple plots brought up, there's an option to hide the little header tabs that are displayed, just to make the display a little bit cleaner. All right, so there's some more useful functions. So let me just clear out. We're going to clear out this plot here. Actually, so I'm just going to start from a clean slate for this purposes of this demonstration. I'm going to open up Post again. All right, and so it has loaded the results of that model that I had open. And so we're just gonna pretend that I've sort of plotted, some data that I'm interested in. And then let's say I ran a second simulation, and once I run that second simulation, I can import the results for that. And now what I can do is easily compare the results from between the two without having to necessarily go in and navigate to that same item in the data tree. And so the way that I would do that would be I would just simply select this checkbox for that whole data set, and then I can right click and say, oh, actually it's up here. I would just click on compare data. So that's a little bit of a time saver. There's also another feature that is makes previewing the results a little bit more convenient. So I'm just gonna clear this for now. And so this is called the preview mode. And if you click on this, then what you can do is you can basically click on any of these data items, and if I click on another one, what it does is that it erases the last one and then brings it up. So this way I can kind of just quickly go through and review quite a few different results without having to go in and delete the previous curve in between each step. So that's another thing that can save a lot of time. All right. And I'm just looking at my list of things to demonstrate here. So that's pretty much the main features that I think most users will find the most convenient. And so basically, the main advantage here main advantages are of using Post is that, you know, it really can if you have large RPLT files, it can really handle things efficiently and improve your workflow of dealing with the plot data. It has a lot of user interface features which make you know, some of the standard operations a lot more easy to do, such as selecting multiple curves, easily renaming the titles, and being able to navigate, zoom in, and pan along the plot, and a couple other features such as the change data, compare data, and the preview mode that again help make the whole process easier to do. So that's what I have for Post today.
Okay, great. Thanks, Nelson. That was really good. So, you know, by the way, I think a logical question would be, you know, why is the interface for Post not exactly the same as, you know, the RecurDyn interface? And I think like most software companies, you know, Function Bay has projects to kind of investigate new things. So, and then, you know, Function Bay has, you know, people who from time to time do, you know, different investigations. So it was really a combination of people investigating, you know, some different programming techniques and user interface techniques and so forth. You know, that combined with, you know, the user request to have a special tool to do these large plot files, you know, came together for the Post product. You know, and since the RecurDyn plotting is all tied together with the you know, rest of the package, you know, it's not so easy to just separate things out. Anyway, so for that reason, that's why the Post tool is its own separate tool, and things are a little bit different. But the, you know, the advantage of that is that you know, as you see, I mean, there's, you know, Nelson's shown a variety of very useful techniques and commands that are available. And so if there's, you know, certain of those commands that you think would really be helpful to have, you know, in the RecurDyn plotting, you know, then please let us know, and we'll submit, you know, enhancement requests. So, you know, your feedback's essential to, you know, figure out which of these things is most generally helpful. But, you know, our intent is to continue to have this Post tool for a long time. You know, that's just part of the package now. So, so with that, we'd like to be able to handle questions. I'm seeing the chat window. I'm not seeing anything there, but are there any other questions that have come in? Okay. So if you do have questions, you should be able to access, you know, some kind of a chat option on your screen, and you can just type in questions there. And the thing I wanted to let you know about is that, you know, for those of you who are here today and those who are attending tomorrow, we will provide you with early access to the V9R4. So tomorrow at the end of the presentation, you know, we will provide information about that, the link and the information to log in and download. Let's see, other than that, I guess one question that came in is, you know, just to, you know, clarify, I mean, people were asking whether, you know, one has to choose one plot tool or the other. as far as what you're running. And so just again, Nelson covered this, but just to reemphasize that these are, separate licenses. So you can have, a Recurtyn session can be going on, and then if somebody else wants to just review some data, they can bring up the plot tool, and they won't be checking out any other Recurtyn licenses. So that you can, if you have a license, say for 3 seats of Recurtyn, you can have three people using Recurtyn, and you could have now 3 other additional people using the post tool to look at results. So one of the things that opens up for you then is that sometimes you may want to share results with other folks, who don't want to learn Recurtyn, but maybe people just want to review results and maybe use them in some way. Then they could be instructed on how to use the post tool, and you can enable them to use it, and that doesn't take away from the other Recurtyn licenses. And then if they're, extracting loads for FE or tracking motion data or whatever they're doing, generating some kind of curves to include in some kind of documentation on the product or whatever they're doing, then that can all be happening separately. And then people only have, a small number of things to learn versus all of Recurtyn. So I think that's a good opportunity. Okay, so I think we're basically on schedule for today. So tomorrow, starting at the same time as today, we'll have session number 2. So we'll go over the second half of the general Recurtyn enhancements as we looked at earlier. And then we'll also have a presentation on the new heat transfer capability that's associated with the Full Flex product. So that'll be tomorrow's agenda. And if you have questions and you haven't been able to put it into the chat window or whatever, feel free to send me or Nelson or James, any questions that you may have that come to mind. If you want to send that to us, then we can address it in tomorrow's session. All right, with that, thanks very much, and look forward to presenting more information to you tomorrow.